Very excellent news for parents across Canada, anyone who has common sense and opposes gender ideology. And I think that goes worldwide because Canada is sort of a petri dish for bad ideas, but you're seeing an internal defense mechanism towards them panning out over a few years. It should have been 15 minutes, but let's get into it. 78% of Canadians, not Hungarians, not Russians, or, some super base country in the Middle East. 78% of Canadians disagree with one of the foundational pushes of gender ideology, which is that kids should be independent from their parents, and as soon as they declare themselves to be non-binary, trans, whatever, the state must accept this, streamline it, and yada, yada, yada. So 78% of parents believe that parents should be, if a child wants to change their pronouns, a parent should be informed and actively give consent. Now, these are brought into two different categories. The most popular category is the parents need to be informed and give consent for it to happen. The second most popular category is that parents need to be informed of their children's gender change. And then it's about 15% think that there should be no informing parents. Parents have no role in their children's lives. And then 7% are undecided on the issue or whatever. So this is very complex and simple to break down. This is a huge number. 78% of Canadians opposing one of the fundamental cores of the modern left, which is adopted wholeheartedly by the Green, the Bloc, the NDP, and the Liberals. And the Conservative Party's sort of been straddling the fence. You have the PPC over there making this their thing to scream about. 78% is a gigantic number, and it will move the needle. In the Conservative Party, undoubtedly. You've already seen the Ontario Conservative Party, which is notoriously one of the most easily corruptible, let's say, and woke conservative governments in the country. Stephen Leach has seen the numbers, and they've had this come to Jesus moment, and they are now saying that parents actually have a role in their children's lives, which they should have been saying all along, technically have. I mean, this is what they got elected. This is how Doug Ford won the Conservative primary leadership back in 2018. He wanted on the school stuff, saying he was going to stand up to radical sex ed back in 2018. He then folded. He did radical sex ed himself. He's pushed critical race theory. The Ontario PC Party has been a woke disaster, epic corruption, but there was no difference between the Liberals and the NDP, so he won re-election because we love COVID in Ontario. Love it. Mask me harder, daddy. But that's all over. And the Conservatives, even though you don't think they need to, are shifting to this position because it is a immensely popular point of view with 78%. Also, it's 78% on a parental rights issue. Another political truth. Parents vote more than single people. People with children care more about the future and therefore politics than people without children. This skews much heavier on women than it does on men, who have a higher interest in politics in youth than women by far, but it does scale by age. Parents vote, and parents don't want this. And the way you can explain this, how do we get here, is Canada is a very left-wing country. And we love doing new progressive stuff. We love LGBTQ alliances. We love things that sound good. We like racial diversity. We like equity, equality. We like words that sound good and nice. We like things that sound nice. This is what Canadians want. We want nice-sounding policy that doesn't really do much. The problem is this nice-sounding policy has been destructive, to say the least. Bill C-4, which Aaron O'Toole forced through the Conservative Party, it was passed by Trudeau, but O'Toole let it happen unopposed, was the law that, if you're familiar with, this is the one where if a 7-year-old boy says, I'm a girl, and you say, okay, no, you're not. We're taking you to therapy to see if there's any underlying issues. We're just going to take you to a professional psychologist, see if there's... That's considered conversion therapy in Canada. Criminal behavior. You can lose your children for that. So this is where we were in Canada circa 2020, 2021. Just two and a half years ago. Every major party was dead set. Parents have no rights. If parents try and exercise their rights, that is criminal activity. Everyone in Canada was lockstep with parents shouldn't be involved in their children's decisions. The problem, I think, where did this big change come, is that's not actually what parents want. Parents have always wanted this. It's simply when things are explained to people in the right way, it shifts their perception on things. This is always, how polling companies frame questions. I've gone on this rant 8,473 times, to be exact, in the last however many years. So in Canada, we like things that sound LGBTQ friendly, trans friendly, like the New Frontier, just progressive this, because most Canadians don't know what gender ideology entails. They don't know that it's a cut to parental rights. It's just a question you would ask a Canadian, like, do you support trans rights? I support all rights. But trans rights was never explained to people. And I want to break down a part of the poll. Right, so if you see the main poll, and I can link it from Angus Reid, right, it sort of skews by province. They did Atlantic provinces as a region. And Atlantic provinces in Canada are by far the most left-wing or pro-liberal you have. And there's, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, Newfoundland, and Labrador. Those four small provinces are sort of rolled into one in polling for Atlantic. Now, in New Brunswick, this is a Blaine Higgs this is where the Conservative government tried to they pushed the balance here. Like Blaine Higgs, there was like, okay, parents need to be informed if their kids want to change their pronouns under the age of 16. Something the vast majority of Canadians have gone over to support. And he faced revolts from parts of his caucus. This is just within the last year, saying, oh, racism, sexism, transphobia, I don't want to be part of this. This isn't the Conservative Party. I thought Sir John MacDonald would have chopped everyone's nuts off. That type of stuff is immediately what Canadian politicians fear, because we live in a country that doesn't really respect media rights. There's a monopoly. The government funds who they want. They don't fund who they don't want. Then they pass bills to take news off the internet entirely. So overwhelmingly, Canadians have been inundated with these sort of trans rights. It's progressive. You never see on mainstream media an actual breakdown of what trans rights actually entails when they're speaking about it. It's just, Jordan Peterson evil and his demon white men army of incels are trying to go off and blah, 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 blah. This is the CBC, CTV, Global News, all of them. So New Brunswick, it actually scales to the rest of Canada it's actually technically a bit better, as only 14% of 15% believe that parents should have no rights. But in Atlantic Canada, it's only 66% of parents believe parents should have rights, and it's a higher number of no rights in Atlantic Canada. But the Atlantic Canada province with the most, we'll say, based opinion is New Brunswick, who's already had this explained to them, because they've gone through this controversy. They had someone get on TV and say, this is actually what our bill says. This is what we want to do. This is what the extreme left are offering. And then when it's actually explained to people what, the gender ideology push is all about, parents say, actually, I want rights. I think I should be involved in my children's future because that's why I had kids. So I think the rest of Atlantic Canada, which is probably inundated with liberal propaganda on the daily, if this issue were actually pushed towards people in Nova Scotia and PEI, the sort of mystique of, I just support trans rights because it's a new thing, it's progressive, I want to be seen as progressive, I want to be able to tell my grandkids that I stood for trans rights when it was unpopular. That big push. Once this is actually explained to people, their position will shift. And the bigger news, generally in Canada, is the Conservative Party, I've said a lot about them, and I've said this a lot. What do they run on? They run on polls. Before they wipe their ass, they take a poll to see if the Canadians would support them wiping their ass after they take a dump. This is literally what the Conservative Party does. I am convinced that everyone in the Conservative Party does not know how to use the washroom without consulting a polling firm beforehand. It just cannot happen. I've met these people. They're incapable of making their own decisions without polling data from the top telling what to do. 78% is vastly overwhelming. 78% of people, and that's not just Conservatives, this is a large amount of Liberal and NDP voters. And again, this is a major issue, parental rights. This is a big enough issue to flip people into the Conservative Party. So the Conservative Party now polling, let's say 40%, they're polling at least 10 points above the Liberals into Liberal disaster territory. The Conservatives, this number is too big for the Conservative Party to ignore. It is too big and too public now for the polling companies to maliciously shift the numbers here. The overwhelming majority of Canadians, vast plurality, want some sort of parental protections, and it's a very, very, very fringe minority that are pushing it. And currently, the majority of the Canadian public, elected office serves about the 15% of the Canadian lunatics on this issue, and leaving around 80% of Canadians highly dissatisfied. So this is an issue that the Conservative Party cannot ignore. And they are primed to pick up major polling gains, which they already made tons, if they continue to push this policy. Because 78% supporting a wedge extreme issue is a crazy number. You don't see that. Issues this polarizing, usually 30 to 40, it's more complicated. You have to make a choice. No. This is overwhelmingly clear. Canadians support parental rights, and that's a good thing because it's just gone too far in the schools.